Week 4 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I looked to hit off the wire this week. The first guy, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Ferguson, each week he's gotten at least 7 targets in these Cowboy games. So him and Dak Prescott have a good rapport. Dak's always been a tight end friendly quarterback. And so far in the early going for Ferguson. Week 1 at the Giants, 2 catches, 11 yards. Week 2 versus the Jets, 3 catches, 11 yards, a touchdown. And then week 3 at the Cardinals, 5 catches, 48 yards. So right now, Ferguson, he's a tight end I believe could go out there and give fantasy owners anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points. Like I said, Dak Prescott's always liked the tight end in his career, Jason Witten, Dalton Schultz. And now we've seen Dalton Schultz do nothing over there with Houston. So he's a product of the Cowboy system. So right now, Ferguson, while he's playing good football, he has 21 targets the first 3 games of the season here. He's definitely a tight end to hit off the wire this week, and he's available in 60% of fantasy leagues. Next tight end is Donald Parham of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Parham already 3 touchdowns on the season. He's been a good goal line threat here for this Charger team. Week 1 versus Miami, 3 catches, 22 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 at Tennessee, only a catch, 7 yards. And then week 3 at the Vikings, it was fluky ball game, obviously. 2 catches, 4 yards for 2 touchdowns. So right now, week 4, another good matchup versus the Raiders. But Parham, obviously, he's not a big receiver for this team. He's the second tight end on the roster behind Gerald Everett on the depth chart. But right now, 3 touchdowns, like I mentioned. If you want to roll a dice with a guy like this, he's available 99% of fantasy leagues here. And obviously, he's a standout, like I said, to have 2 touchdowns in the game. It is fluky, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns, 4 yards, but it's something to mention for fantasy owners. Justin Herbert obviously trusts him in the red zone, and he's a big target at 6'6". So right now, if you're desperate at tight end, he's out there. And an ad this week, the next tight end is Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers. So this Packer team's got a young nucleus and players going out there making plays for this Packer team. Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, and now Christian Watson hopefully could come back into the lineup. So a young offense over there in Green Bay. Jordan Love looking good, getting these guys the ball. And so far, Luke Musgrave's been solid the first 2 out of 3 games. Week 1 in Chicago, 3 catches, 50 yards. Week 2 at Atlanta, 2 catches, 25 yards. And week 3 versus the Saints, 6 catches, 49 yards. So right now, week 4, Thursday Night Football versus the Lions here, which are vulnerable, giving up points to the tight end. So right here, Musgrave, available in tons of fantasy leagues, 82%. We know tight end's one of the weakest positions in fantasy football. And if you could get 8 to 10 points, to be honest, in PPR leagues here from the tight end position, it's definitely in here, I believe, for fantasy owners. Because even a guy like Mark Andrews, we haven't seen do much in the first few weeks of the season. He was the second tight end off the board. So right now, while Musgrave's a decent part of this offense over there, and tight end's obviously a young quarterback's best friend and security blanket for Jordan Love. Musgrave isn't there this week. Next tight end's Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. I've mentioned Fant over the last couple weeks now as an hit off the wire. Obviously, his ceiling's probably 8 to 10 fantasy points, but in deeper leagues, if you're looking for a tight end, he's available in 98% fantasy leagues. So the last couple weeks here for Fant, week 2 with Detroit, 4 catches, 56 yards. And week 3 versus the Panthers, 4 catches, 41 yards. So far, 2 solid ball games in PPR leagues out of the first 3. And week 4, a good matchup at the New York Giants. That just got torched by George Kittle for 7 catches and 90 yards in that one. So the Giants never were good versus the tight end position. Geno Smith and Noah Fant this season, they're building on their rapport from last season a little bit. And if you're desperate for a tight end, like I said, he's available in 98% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final tight end I looked at off the wire is Tyler Conklin of the New York Jets. I mentioned Tyler Conklin last week as an ad. And Conklin, he didn't have a great ball game, only 3 catches, 26 yards, but it was a wet football game over there in MetLife Stadium. Zach Wilson, we know he's not a good quarterback, and it was a tough matchup versus a team like the Patriots that's had the Jets number now for over a decade and have won 15 ball games in a row. So the last few games here for Conklin since Wilson has stepped in for Aaron Rodgers. Week 2 with that was 5 catches, 50 yards. And then week 3, like I mentioned, 3 catches, 26 yards. So week 4, it's going to be a ball game and a tough one here for the Jets versus the Kansas City Chiefs, where they're going to be chasing points most likely early and often. So right now, while Conklin's available in 97% of fantasy leagues, and even last season, we did see Conklin make some plays and had a good rapport with Zach Wilson. And like I said, a tight end's always a young quarterback security blanket and weapon that they rely on in tough situations. So right now, while Conklin's out there and it's going to be a ball game where the game script's most likely where the Jets going to have to throw a whole lot. Tight end that serviceable here in week 4, and he's available in 97% of fantasy leagues. That's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.